Polling stations across the country closed on Tuesday after the end of the third day of the 2024 presidential elections. Polling stations in the three-day elections witnessed a big turnout nationwide, especially from youth and women, to cast their ballots in the elections. The Operation Chamber of the Coordination Committee of Parties, youth leaders and politicians continued to follow up the voting, witnessing heavy turnout and smooth movement of the electoral process without any violations. 65 million eligible voters cast ballots at 11,631 subcommittees inside 9,376 main polling centers nationwide to choose a president for a new 6-year term. Contesting candidates are President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, head of the Egyptian Democratic Social Party Farid Zahran, head of the Al-Wafd Party Abdel Sanad Yamama, and head of the People's Republican Party Hazem Omar. Head of the Executive Board of the National Election Authority, Councillor Ahmed Binderi, said voting process wrapped up after an end of the third and last day of the presidential elections across Egypt. The Operation Chamber of the Coordination Committee of Parties, youth leaders and politicians continued following up the voting in the elections, witnessing heavy turnout as well as smooth movement of the electoral process without any violations. Meanwhile, security bodies continued their measures nationwide to secure the voting process through securing locations of polling stations to make sure of the organization of the vote process and offer all facilitation for voters. This came within the Interior Ministry's keenness to provide a secured atmosphere for citizens and face any attempts that could undermine the voting process or security, upon directives of the Interior Minister Mahmoud Tawfiq. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi held a meeting on Tuesday with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Major General Abbas Kamel, head of the General Intelligence, and Minister of Irrigation and Water Resources, Hani Suelam. Presidential spokesperson Ahmed Fahmy said during the meeting, President al-Sisi followed up on developments in cooperation activities in the field of irrigation and water resources with the Nile Basin countries. This cooperation is regarding rainwater harvesting tanks and underground drinking water stations, as well as waterway purification projects. During the meeting, President al-Sisi stressed that cooperation with the Nile Basin countries represent one of the most important constants of joint Egyptian-African work. This cooperation, the President added, contributes to the implementation of joint development projects which are of mutual benefit to the whole of the African continent. Egypt condemned in the strongest terms on Tuesday the terrorist attack that took place in Khyber province, Pakistan. In a statement issued by the Foreign Ministry, it said Egypt's government and people expressed their sincere condolences and sympathy to the government and people of Pakistan in this painful tragedy, and to the families of the victims, wishing a speedy recovery for the injured. Egypt also reiterated its firm position, rejecting all forms of violence and terrorism, and called on all countries to dry up all sources of financing terrorism. According to humanitarian sources, Egypt sent an aid convoy of 80 trucks on Tuesday to the reopened Kerem Shalom crossing from Israel into the Gaza Strip for inspection. Another 100 trucks were sent to the Nitzana border post, which has been processing all international aid from Egypt's Rafah border crossing before it is allowed into Gaza. Israel agreed on Tuesday to reopen Kerem Shalom as a checkpoint to inspect aid into the bombarded Palestinian territory, where more than 18,400 people have been killed, according to the Health Ministry. Israel stressed on Tuesday that no new direct crossings will be opened, but the Kerem Shalom crossing will be used to check trucks before sending them in through Rafah. After more than 2 months of war that have reduced much of Gaza to rubble, UN agencies and aid groups fear the territory will soon be overwhelmed by starvation and disease. The visiting chief of the UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Philippe Lazzarini, on Tuesday, likened Gaza to hell on earth. UN humanitarian agency OCHA said that around 100 trucks a day were bringing humanitarian supplies from Egypt into Gaza since a week-long truce ended on December 1st.